Hey everyone, welcome. My name is Dominic Lloyd-Randolphi, and I'm the publication director for newgradoccupationaltherapy.com. And today we're going over the entire process of the OT school application process. And so with me, I have Ray Salvador. Ray and I went to school together and graduated in 2017 from MGH IHP. And he's working in hand therapy, the clinic director for their Bellevue practice of Washington hand therapy. Ray, why don't you introduce yourself?
How's it going, guys? Name's Ray. I am out here in Bellevue, Washington. I am the one of the clinic directors for one of our outpatient hand therapy practices over here. And as Dom had said, we both went to the IHP, graduated last year, 2017. It's been a year now, so time definitely flies.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. The reason I asked you specifically was because about a year ago, you wrote us like a mini ebook on the whole OT application process, and it did very well in terms of views and downloads and signups and everything. So I just wanted you to kind of bring your face to the masses, let everyone know who you are in person, and then maybe we can kind of dive down deeper into the process. So before we get going, why don't you tell everyone kind of your route to OT and how you got into school and just your story, really.
Absolutely. So I went to undergrad at Seattle University out here in Washington. It's a it's a smaller private university, just pretty much in the heart of downtown almost. But I studied sport and exercise science over there, which is basically kinesiology or your exercise science type course. So you take anatomy and physiology and all those kind of sports and movement based classes. And I graduated in 2012. And I ended up working actually in a pediatrics clinic for 2 years after graduation. And along the way, I was exploring different kind of routes or different grad school options. And I ended up deciding on occupational therapy after volunteering in a couple of different settings. I volunteered in outpatient pediatrics in a sensory processing, sensory integration type gym. I did inpatient at one of the local hospitals over here down in Puyallup, actually. And I just kind of fell in love with what the therapist did. And fast forward later, I'm working in hand therapy now. But along the way, I was taking prerequisites. So I had most of the prerequisites actually through sports and exercise science, but a couple of them I didn't, which were kind of the like psychology. I think statistics was another one that was required. I think that kind of brings us to one of the questions that we wanted to talk about was just based on like a type of major. Any of them that is kind of recommended to go into the profession? Is that something that we wanted to kind of answer?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a question I get a lot. I get a lot of emails from prospective students, and we have a couple good articles on them. But really, like, I give the example of our class, and that everyone, I think like a third of our class either had a major or minor in performing arts, or maybe it was a fourth, but it was like a high number. And I always explain to people that, and I just use our classic example because that's all I really know, but maybe a fourth were maybe like my age who got into school right after undergrad. And then maybe about a half were your age, where there may be 1 or 2 years in between because you didn't know exactly where you wanted to go or what you wanted to do. And then actually like a fourth were 30 and over and like switching careers. And so I tell people, your major doesn't matter. And honestly, you might, like, if you have something unique like global studies or dance, it kind of sets you apart, really. So I tell people to focus on your prereqs and get the best grade you can on your prereqs, because that will matter more than say taking exercise science type classes. Did you get all of your prereqs done at Seattle University, or did you take some in your time off?
So Actually, yeah. So the big kind of, I mean, I guess the big prereqs I took at Seattle University were like anatomy and physiology. I think a couple of like communications classes, but no, mostly. Actually, a lot of the prerequisites I did were while I was working full time in that pediatrics clinic. I actually took a couple of them online. I took a couple of Saturday classes. I actually took biology as a Saturday class, but I took them at community colleges actually, just because one, they save a lot of money, and two, it kind of fit with my schedule as far as having to work full time, and had like a weird kind of I wasn't able to like go to like an early class, or like I didn't want to like sit through like a 7 o'clock class like at the end of the day after like an 8-hour day's worth of work. So I opted for the either taking online classes and those weekend classes. But the one kind of good thing is at the place I was working was they did tuition reimbursement, so I was able to kind of have some of that covered. But that was kind of my route to finishing those OT school prerequisites. I think the one thing was that it took a little bit longer, just because you weren't able to take a full-time class load. But it's definitely manageable if you have to work and finish prerequisites at the same time.
And I think that for those watching or like in the same situation, I wouldn't be too concerned about schools weighing that against you at all, because that sounds fairly common. Not everyone knows exactly what they want to do, or that they want to be an OT, and so they have to take community courses or like one class semester for a couple of years to get that. I'd say is relatively common. Ray, thanks for sharing. I didn't really take any prereqs like outside of school. I got a C in my stats class my sophomore year or my junior year, so I had to retake it. And I actually did that in the summer, and it was intense. It was like just it was like a 3-hour class for 6 weeks or something like that, Monday to Friday over the summer, which then again allowed me to work or get observation hours and things like that. So at your clinic, were there OTs there? Or I know one of the major concerns about the OT cast is the like getting observation hours and getting a good letter recommendation. So were you able to get that done at work, or did you have to go someplace else?
So I was able to kind of do a combination of both, actually. So our that clinic that I was working at was actually it was like a primary care pediatrics clinic. So we had like a ton of different professions there. We had like a neurologist. Basically, all of them were medical doctors, so MDs. But I was a scheduler for one of them, and he actually wrote me a pretty good recommendation, which kind of, I think you should really kind of you should ask for recommendations from professionals or people that know you the best, so that can speak on your kind of work ethic, I think, is a big one. Also, your ability to kind of communicate, especially with patients if you're working in that type of setting. And I mean, the other thing too is just to have somebody that kind of, obviously, like you want somebody that's going to write good things about you, but also one that is able to that really knows you as from like a holistic, or I guess like a whole, like well-rounded out type of view, versus just kind of, if like you're just that if it's just from like a teacher or something like that, or if it's from somebody that actually like you've worked with for a long time. So I got I got one of my recommendations from there. And also I think the other thing too is just depending on where you're applying for OT school is, they do require, just based on the program and their kind of prerequisites for applying, that you have a set amount of hours specifically volunteering or shadowing an occupational therapist. So I did have to kind of spend a couple of days out of the week. I was able to kind of be flexible with my work schedule and take some time off in like Tuesdays and Thursdays in the morning to kind of go into that sensory integration pediatrics outpatient OT clinic. So that's how I got a couple of my other hours. But as far as other like clinical hours, I was able to, I included like my work experience, just as far as like working face to face with like parents, scheduling and things like that. Cause you might not think about it, or it might not be like something that you really consider, but that kind of face to face contact with patients is a big thing. As far as what we do as occupational therapists. We're always talking to people, I think. So, communication is like a big thing. So that's one of the reasons I kind of included that in there. And I haven't looked back at the OTCAS for a couple of years now, but I think, it asks you to list like different kinds of like contact experience, I think. So that's something that I was able to kind of put in there, which actually had like I got a lot of hours from.
I think you're onto something there. So I didn't have any sort of mental health experience or hand therapy experience, or I didn't work at a front desk of like a clinic or anything like that. I worked at Target for 3 years through school. But I think like if someone has it on the resume, it shows commitment because you were there for an extended period of time. And then you have to be sort of, kind of like what you said, you have to be creative in your skills. And so I was able to demonstrate my teamwork skills and my communication skills and my problem solving skills through like the difficulties and challenges that I experienced at Target. So for those watching, don't feel like you have to go get a rehab tech job or that you have to go work at a front desk or like do patient access or anything like that. Like there's other ways to get in. And part of that is, I think, is just be demonstrating your skills and showing on your letter that you write, like your personal statement, demonstrating or like making it clear how the skills you have can translate into occupational therapy and why you think you'll be successful as an OT and in school. So I got about 100 hours of observation at a pediatric clinic right across the street from my undergrad, and another 100 hours at the hospital where I did my field work at, and now I work at. So it's really cool to have like done a full circle of like not having any idea what really OTs did to now working there as a staff OT. That has been fantastic. But let's go back. I touched on or explained the personal statement. Do you remember the prompt you had? I think they're kind of generic, and I'm not sure if they change very much all the same, like, year to year, but I think they're generally, explain why you want to be an OT or something to that effect. Does that sound similar?
Yeah, it was, honestly, I don't remember it like word for word, but I think the prompt that I got during the application process, I think they're all kind of standardized, but it was just speak on like your experience with like occupational therapy and why you think you'd be a good fit for the profession. Does that sound kind of like what you had written down or like what your prompt was?
Yeah. And so I wrote about like my experience at work and some on-campus jobs I had, and then some like personal interactions I had and helping volunteer work really. And I worked my butt off on that. I would say other than your GPA, your GPA and your GRE are important because schools get hundreds and hundreds of applicants. At some point, they just have to like cut off a list, right, and just like take the top half. And so your GPA and your GRE are really like almost like your entry point or the point that gets you into the door. But your personal statement is your time to shine. And I think that's one of the. I got plenty of rejections getting into schools, but I think that's the reason I had multiple interview offers and school offers was that I was able to like somewhat eloquently describe why I wanted to be an OT. So again, for those listening, I did quite a few drafts starting in the fall, and I met with my campus writing center, and they were able to kind of work with me, help me identify my audience a little bit better, make sure what I was saying is clear, and that I wasn't assuming they knew what I was talking about. And then, of course, like grammar, language, syntax, punctuation, all that sort of stuff. But I would say that is a big part of the OTCAS. I know I haven't looked at it in a while, but it's one of the biggest parts. What about the GRE? I kind of touched on that. Did you have to take that at all?
Yeah, for the I think, I mean, at least at the programs that I applied to, the GRE was, it was a requirement for I think all the schools that I applied for. Um, but I remember I didn't really like. I mean, I sat down and studied for it, and I actually like took a like an 8 like it was like a Saturday crash course on just like test taking skills. We had like a practice kind of GRE exam, but I mean that was the most that I really went into it. I mean, I think part of it is like test taking skills and just kind of like stress management, but also like there were some pretty like just really like reading through the actual question and just that like you were answering what they wanted you to or what they were asking pretty much. But I did it twice out here. I mean, it was pretty expensive. I mean, sure, like just depending on like what your circumstances are, I was working full time and all that, so I was able to kind of pay for it. But I mean, it's a pretty expensive test to take. But I ended up taking it twice, and I mean, the second time I think I just ended up doing the same. Like I did the same the second time that I took it, so it was kind of that second one was kind of a wash. But no, I mean, it was pretty much. I mean, I had to take it for all the programs I was applying to, so it wasn't really like it wasn't out of the question. So it's definitely something that is you should definitely consider. To try to do your best on it. If you feel like, I mean, I felt that taking a class on it was helpful for me being able to just take the test and be nervous about it. But I don't think that it's something that you should stress out too much about, just because like you were saying, like you have your personal statement that really helps you. I mean, that's really where you want to stand out the most. Like if like two people can have like perfect GRE scores, but if somebody else has something in their if somebody has like if their personal statement shines more than somebody else's, I mean, I would hope that the school goes for something like that person that's more unique, but there's
it's a lot like the SAT, really. I felt like they're this kind of the same style of questions plus the writing portion, which I felt like I rocked out of the park, and then I got my score, and I think it was pretty low actually. But no, that's interesting. That's an interesting point. We're thinking about these standardized tests, but does that really translate to being a good OT student and that being a good OT? And I would argue no. I think it's just it just kind of demonstrates your general knowledge, your aptitude, and your test taking ability. That's why I think it's kind of just like something like a step you have to do to get into school. It's almost like do the best you can. I wouldn't know, don't try to. I wouldn't pay multiple times to take it and keep trying. I think my scores were like 151 and 153, which I remember 150 being like right smack dab in the middle. So I kind of just said, that's the best I think I'm going to do. I'm going to spend my energy on other spots, and think about it. Like, I mean, I know it's so competitive now and you'll go to any school you can get in, but you're also kind of feeling out the schools too to make sure it's a good fit for you. And so I think if you're going to a school and they rank the GRE pretty high, I'm not sure if that's a school I would want to go to, if that makes sense, because I would want them for my other skills as opposed to sitting at a desk for 3 hours filling in circles. What else? What else do you have for us? We covered. I'm trying. I want to make sure we go through kind of all of the OT cast sort of stuff. So, do you remember? We kind of touched on grades. Do you remember? Do you mind sharing your undergrad GPA? I think mine was about 3.5 something.
My undergrad GPA ended up being, I think it was around 3.4, like probably like 3.43 or something along those lines. But I think they as far as like OTCAS goes, they take into consideration that entire kind of your entire cumulative GPA from undergrad, but they also look at your like prerequisite GPA. So your A&P, your stats, all those other, like just depending on the program that you're applying to, they calculate those as well. So I think that's another place where you can kind of stand out as far as like making your application, because you could have like let's say you have like a 3-point GPA for undergrad, but you're going back and you're going like as far as like either retaking classes to get a better GPA for the prereqs, or just taking the prereqs right off the bat. If you're really shining those prerequisites, then schools are going to take that into consideration as far as like you had a like a subpar GPA or just an average GPA for undergrad, but in these prerequisite courses he really shined. So that's another kind of little tidbit, or like another place where you can kind of stand out as far as like your application.
Yeah, the GPA one's hard because you're doing all this stuff for OTCAS, and then say you apply to 10 schools, they all want something different or all look at things differently. So I know, like, so I said I got a C in stats and retook it and got an A. Some schools look at the A, and then some schools take an average and would give me a B for my stats. And so a lot of it falls onto the applicant to be calling the program and asking. And I mean, you're not being annoying by any means, but it's just a lot of upfront work to figure out exactly what do people want. And there is like a general list of prereqs, but again, every school is different. So some schools want physics, some don't. Some say you don't need it, but it's suggested. Like, what does that mean? Is that a yes or no? Don't play mind games. So I didn't take physics, but I took biology. I had 2 semesters of human development, because the way my school did it was like one semester was birth to teenage or 18, and then the next semester was 18 to adulthood or to death. And then so I took those. Did you take sociology, or did you have to?
I used sociology as one of the it was considered one of those classes that you could use towards the application. So I had already taken that my freshman year in undergrad, and I got a pretty decent grade in it.
Gotcha.
Versus going back and taking.
Oh, good. I had to squeeze it in my senior year, and I actually really liked it. It was a lot of fun, and surprisingly translated fairly well to our OT program. We did that. A&P was a big one. That one was kind of like the one I had to work extra hard at to make sure I got a fairly decent grade. Abnormal psych. Did you have to take abnormal psych?
I did end up taking abnormal psych. That was one of the I think that was one of the classes that I took online. That's one of the ones I took. And just going back to the A&P thing, the other thing that you want to kind of just have in the back of your mind, or just like really consider too, is I think for OTCAS, just depending on where you're applying, or I think it might be like a standardized thing for them. The grades must have been like complete, or the class must have been completed within the last 5 years, I think. So if like my A&P was going to expire, so if I didn't, luckily enough, I got into school, but if I hadn't, I would have had to retake those 2 A&P classes for them to get for them to count towards the application.
Yeah, and I had. So I want to back up again, only because I was talking to like a possible pre-OT student last week at work, and she was talking about how she took, and she didn't know this at the time, but she took biology in undergrad, but in her transcript it says biology for non-science majors. And then when she either didn't get in or waitlisted, she called and said, "What's the deal?" And they said, "Your biology it's for non-science majors." So she had to retake biology. So again, more things to think about. Now it's hard because you might have taken it your freshman year, not really realize, 1, what it was, and 2, that you wanted to do OT school, and then maybe 3 years, 4 years later, you're like, yeah, this is what I want to do, and you go back and you don't remember the class, so you're thinking, oh yeah, the biology easy, and then you're applying and you have no idea. And then I'll back forward to anatomy. My class we had a cadaver lab, and again, this is one of the things you got to help check with schools, because not all of them require a cadaver lab. Some might give you extra credit. We had it. You and I had it in grad school, so I definitely felt a little more prepared, knowing that I was working with cadavers. And then, 4 weeks later, here I am again, and being used to it. I don't think you actually ever touched a cadaver. I think you made it through our entire anatomy without actually having to lay your hands on it somehow. So that's very impressive.
I had to help kind of flip one of the cadavers over. I remember, but it was a lot of YouTube that
Yeah,
semester.
that's funny. I'm just teasing you. So what other things do you think an applicant can do up to this point where um, they're still working on their OT cast, they're working on their letter of recommendation, they've got their grades, but they haven't applied yet or they haven't made any interviews. What other sort of things do you think someone could do to kind of strengthen their application?
So it was interesting, actually. One of the students that we had here actually was talking about her application to OT school, and she did something unique. It's not something that I'm like recommending or anything like that, but she did something unique in that she put a bunch of memes together, actually.
Wow.
And yeah, like I think she uploaded it as a like separate document in her OT school application. And I'm not sure if that's what put her over the top. I mean, I think she had like a lot of experience and all this other stuff, but she did mention that. But I mean, anything like I think that brings us to like a different topic. It's or not a different topic, but like another point. Like it's just that anything that you can kind of put into your application as far as like that will make you stand out. I mean, I know we've kind of like harped on that this entire kind of session, but it's like, you know, if you have any like research experience or like, you know, volunteer experience or like if you've been published at all, like in undergrad, like for like a research or some sort of like project or anything like that, that's a big, like, you know, those are big things that you can really put in. Cause I mean, part of what we do, like as far as like occupational therapy goes, is like, I mean, at least our program is really concerned with research and like adding to the body of knowledge. So I mean, if you have like if you're published in something or you have like experience putting together statistics or research, I mean, that's definitely something I think you should, you know, like try to consider.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome. I want to meet the girl with the memes. That is super funny. I'm thinking, I wonder, you know, so a lot of schools have additional supplemental applications. And I remember it was either ours or another one where it was like, you know, they already had my personal statement from OTCast, but it was, they also asked for like any sort of additional document to sort of explain your situation. So I know, like, I was a graduate assistant for the PA program, the physician assistant program at IHP, and a lot of people would explain if they had a poor semester, they'd explain what was going on in their life. And it was not an excuse. It was not an excuse for saying like, you know, I got to see here because of this. It was more of a, I had this hard time in my family's life, or I had this happen to me, and it kind of like, it shows how they met an obstacle and they overcame it. And it was like an opportunity for them to, one, explain their performance, but also, you know, again, advocate for themselves on how they could handle the stresses of grad school, which I thought was super neat. I would think I'm not sure how many supplemental applications you did. We had the one from our school. There were a couple other ones where it didn't really seem like they wanted anything different other than extra money. You know, a lot of times I felt like I was putting in more of the stuff. But there were a couple where I had to write like personal like statements. You know, like I think Creighton has one on Benedictine values or something about Catholicism. And then I did one interview for a school in New York, and they had me write like a response to an ethical situation.
Sorry, I think my internet cut out.
Oh, that's all right.
Can you hear me?
I was asking. No, that's fine. I was asking if you had any sort of experience with supplemental applications at all.
I mean, there were a couple as far as, you know, I applied to, I think USC has one. And I think University of Puget Sound, like the supplemental application fee, which you kind of touched on. And I think a couple of them are just like additional, just like questions. So, I mean, like if it's something that you're able to kind of just, if you have like an experience that you can answer or add to your application, I mean, it's definitely something to consider if it's like within your, I mean, obviously, if it's a requirement for, the school, like if you don't do the supplemental application, or if they require the supplemental application, then they won't even consider your app if you don't finish it. So, I mean, that's the other thing that seems like it's, like a no-brainer. But
your mic broke up a little bit. Did you say? I heard USC and University of Puget Sound for their, but I missed everything in between. Were you just naming other schools?
So those are the two that were other two that I applied to that did have supplemental applications, and they are, sometimes, I'm pretty sure both of those schools require you to complete those 2 supplemental apps. So, I mean, I think some of them are just like additional questions. But, other schools, they don't mention it or not, whether or not they want you to do it or not. But I mean, if you can, and like it's something that you can kind of, like afford and all that, you definitely should. Because, I mean, if they do require it and you don't do it, obviously they're not even going to consider your application. So.
Right. So let's move on. We've got, say we have a gal and she's got her GPA and her prereqs and everything's into her OTCAS and she hits submit. How did you look at different schools across the country? So say someone's like, they got all their stuff ready, and they think they've got a good idea. Did you make like a pros and cons list of different schools? Did you start locally and then spread out? Did you just want to go to the East Coast as far away as you could? Kind of, what was your process on that?
So for me, it was the big thing for me was like, the vicinity, as far as being here in like the Seattle area, like all of my family is here, and my friends and all that. And but I applied to a couple of schools here, applied to a school down in California at USC, and then my kind of reach school was MGH out in Boston. So, I mean, it was just kind of a
just like a win, just like a not really
so like my fiance actually, she was like, hey, you should try applying to this program. It's the first OTD program out in New England, and it's the worst that they can say is no. And she was actually, that was the other thing too. I mean, she was actually out in Massachusetts at the time. So that was the other thing that kind of pushed me to, kind of apply to that school out in Boston. And that kind of, it's like, it's, as far as like, if you're applying to like a new program or anything, I don't think you should be afraid to.
Yeah, not at all.
Especially if they're still in the process of like accreditation and all that stuff.
Right.
And I think the other thing to kind of consider as well is like, cost, length of the program. I know that there's a big debate right now in like the OT world about kind of transitioning the master's to a doctorate. But if you're looking for like cost effectiveness or just based on like time and all that stuff, a master's is still the entry point into the profession.
Right.
So that's the other thing to kind of consider as well.
Yeah, I know when I went to interview day for our school, I was a little hesitant because I didn't know what, I'd heard to like go, just make sure you go to an accredited school, and all of a sudden I was at an interview for one that wasn't. And I was sitting there thinking, what's the deal? What happens? All these ideas like worst case scenario, doomsday type of thing. And then I hear them talk, and I'm on my phone and I can Google these professors, and I realize like their CVs are like this long, and you just keep scrolling. It's like, oh, like these professors all left good paying jobs at established programs to start this one. Like they wouldn't do that if it was a fail. And then later I kind of learned, ACOT, the accrediting body for OT programs, there's 3 phases, and they don't let you even start the first phase if you don't think you can do it. Because it doesn't look good for them. So if they had 100 schools just start and then they had to shut them all down, that was bad on them. So they do a lot of ACOT does a lot of like the hands-on consulting, auditing type of stuff, like right in the early stages. And then they just kind of come and make sure everything is going as planned for the next couple. And that's what we went through, and it was super awesome. we both did the OTD. I kind of knew I wanted to. I applied to both. For me, though, it was all about the school. I just really wanted to go there, and I'd
Mhm.
known I wanted to go far away for grad school, and thankfully I had family in Massachusetts, so that made it relatively easy to make that decision. Uh, but I'm not sure if I would have said, if I didn't get in, I'm not sure if I had a preference.
So I think we're experiencing some technical difficulties. Dom just actually reached out to me. His computer died, so just bear with us a little bit as he gets it restarted.
Kitty. Hey, Ray, you here? We're live.
Oh,
When you get a second.
yeah, we're back.
All right, guys. There we go. We can edit probably some of that out later. Well, what was I talking about? I can't even remember.
Um,
I was on a tangent. Oh, talking about like, masters versus OTD. There at this point there is a difference. But if you want to be an OT, I would say just go to whatever school feels right for you and do what's best for you. If you need to be close to home or my cats are going nuts. If you need to be close to home or say you go across the country, but you fall in love with the program, I wouldn't weigh the master's doctorate thing too heavily in your decision. I would say view each program individually and pick which one is going to be comfortable for you, which one you like the first is that. The one you're going to want to spend every single waking minute, like, locked in a building studying for a couple of years. That's the one you're going to want to go to. And that's why I chose the school we went to. Turns out, I loved it, and I'm super glad I did the OTD. But for all these prospective students that will be watching this, I would say don't weigh it too heavily in your decision.
Yeah, I think the other thing to kind of to look at with the schools that you're applying to is if you're really big into research, or if you're really big, like if you're just interested in other things, see like who they're affiliated with, like see as far as where you'd be able to get potential like fieldwork placements. Master or MGH, the institute. We were fortunate enough to be able to have experiences in a ton of different at a bunch of different like hospitals, outpatient settings, with Partners Healthcare out in Boston, Mass General, and even at like Harvard and all those other places. So that was like one of the big things that they kind of emphasize with the program as far as their kind of draw to get you to go to their school. So
Right.
That's another big thing to consider.
So what else do you look in a school? I talked about like faculty, and you kind of talked about like the city it's in. What about things like I don't know, facilities? Like how much do you weigh that in your decision? I've heard of some schools where my coworkers went to, they were in an old classroom in the basement of the physical education building. And then there were ours that were like kind of by like in the harbor. Do you think did it play a factor for you? And if you would do it again, do you think it should? Or if you're giving advice to someone else, do you think they should consider it?
I definitely think that, since you're going to be spending your entire kind of next 2.5 years at the school, it's definitely something you should consider as far as like, like what does the campus look like? If you have the luxury of being able to kind of visit the school before you apply or during the process of application, like see if you can schedule like a tour of the school with one of the facility there, like one of the like the students or anything like that, just to kind of get a feel for how the campus is, resources, and what their labs are like, if you can look at that. Because I think that, it's definitely very, it's conducive to your learning as far as, the type of environment that you're in. So I would definitely, for me personally, I would definitely take a look at that, because I think applying to IHP in 2013, 2014, it was, like even just, let's like 4 years ago, it's night and day. I think the difference is now, like
Right.
Their facilities are so much more nice now that the OT programs are established.
They've got a new clinic, and so that's kind of what I was gonna say is like I wouldn't worry too much about like the desk you sit at or the paint on the walls. But the reason I picked the school I went to is they had like that what they call a functional living lab, and those are kind of popping up at new programs and old, where it's a place for you to learn kind of your ADLs in essentially an apartment or a kitchen or a bathroom, and where clients can come and do that. And so that to me, I love that a lot, and it was a cool learning place. I also like the idea,
the PT school had an on-site clinic, and the speech therapy had an on-site clinic, and the OT one got up and running as soon as we left. But I would have loved to do that. So that's another thing to look at is, when you're looking at these different programs, think about, is there any place here where I can get good hands-on education? Because that is what you need. The theory and stuff is all there, and that's great and that's important. But what about the school is going to help me be the best occupational therapist? And for me, I learned by doing. And so I was thinking, this lab is awesome. But if you're a good learner and you learn by reading and writing, you might be okay with, you're just like a more standard traditional college setting where if you're going to be at Starbucks and studying anyways, then it doesn't really matter kind of what the facilities at school are looking like.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to go over an hour, and we're kind of coming up close. And so why don't we real quick, do you mind sharing a little bit about like your interview experiences or kind of like the next step? So you've applied to, you feel like OTCAS done all your supplemental stuff. You got your essays done. You hit send, and you get an email back a couple months to say, "Congrats, we want to bring you in."
Yeah, that was I think I submitted my OTCAS.
Do you remember where you were when you opened up that email?
I do. So I submitted my OTCAS in like November-ish. And then I was actually down in Portland. I was at a Toys R Us back when they were still a thing. And, I got an update on my phone saying, hey, congrats. Like we'd like to bring you in for interview day in February of 2014. So I was ecstatic. I was super excited. And then just also like super nervous at the time too, because it was like, I got to go in for an interview and all that now. But fast forward a couple months later, I'm on campus, and definitely just a little tip, if like just depending on what if you're a boy or girl, just make sure that you're dressed professionally. I think that's a big thing that schools will look at is
black suit, black pantsuit, kind of, we can't go wrong with black, right?
Yeah. I went with navy blue. But I think our interview process was a little bit, it was a group interview. So it wasn't like your traditional, like sit down one-on-one with, like a faculty member or anything like that. But, I think, did that, kind of got a feel for like the other applicants around you. I was super nervous, honestly. I think the one thing I remember from interview day was, during lunch, or the kind of the breakaway, was I went up to one of the faculty members, and I called her the wrong name. So I was like, I definitely just shot myself. Definitely just shot myself in the foot about getting into the school. Sorry, there's an ambulance outside.
That's all right.
But she ended up being like one of the faculty I feel like I was closest with. So
Yeah.
I think just going there confident, really be able to kind of, talk, communicate, really kind of, you're pretty much selling yourself to the schools. So really try to network, talk to as many of the professors as you can, try to have them be able to put a face to the name that's on the applicant, I think.
Yeah. I also did the group interview, and if it makes you feel better, I went to the wrong interview session. But I think the point of the group interview, and if you come across this like through your applications, the point one is to also sell yourself, but they're kind of testing you, so if there's a group of 3, you don't want to be the one that's like the first to answer all the questions and like be overbearing, and you don't want to be the one that sits back and shy, because I had both of those in my group. There was one girl that's like, come on, like you got to say something, it's your turn. But it's more like, you listen, you say, that's interesting, I think this, what do you think? You're kind of facilitating conversations. They're looking at the teamwork, the dynamics, how friendly you are, how genuine you are, things like that. I've been to some other interviews where people had, very scripted response, and like they could tell there's nothing wrong with practicing, but it was all like very much by the book. Nothing was ad-libbed. and it wasn't like a real, genuine, flowing conversation. And so our school did an interview day, and now that I've been working for a year and a half, I'm learning how other schools do interviews, because that was something I'd only been to one, and I didn't know how, or I'd been to a couple, and I didn't know how other schools did it. I did apply to one where you had to write like a written response, and there was like a group activity and then interview. But now that I'm kind of in this more professional role, I've been helping out at some local colleges, universities here in town, and I helped out with some interviews for this one program where I teach adjunct. And I'm not kidding, they have a table where it was me and another OT and the program director and a current student all at one table. And then across from us was the person applying. And we just kind of went down the row and asked her questions and had them like repeat back. And part of that, not to like be intimidating, but you're kind of able to get more of that natural conversation. But it's tough because you're on a time limit, right? And so it almost feels like a barrage of questions, and then they leave, they go sit in a room, and they kind of come back. But I know there's another school here in town where they do rolling admissions, where they don't do like a specific interview day where they bring people on campus. They look at applications as they come in. They invite them to campus and meet with them and show them around and maybe have a like lunch or a conversation. And then they decide yes or no. And I know that's like very different from what I've experienced. And so for those listening, don't be surprised if you encounter those, because all sorts of different schools have their own different ways. And I think the overall goal is to be genuine, really know why you want to be an OT, be thoughtful, and don't be too nervous. We all have to do it, right? Yeah.
That was a tough thing for me.
You're sweating just thinking about it. No, it's a good time. And then, after you'll get through the process. If Ray and I can do it, you can obviously do it. So you go through, and then, you and I both always volunteered and helped out and gave tours and helped facilitate stuff the next year for future classes. And that's always the best part, is kind of give it back to future students. And that's kind of what we're doing now. So Ray, thanks for joining us. The main reason I wanted to do this, and kind of like, it's new grad occupational therapy, and our goal is to hook people up after they're done with school with jobs and give them the best content and help them kind of transition from school to clinician. But there weren't any good resources when I was applying to school. And so what I've been kind of doing in my role here is, I've been really trying hard to answer those questions and provide content on majors and GPAs and GREs and interviews and doing stuff like this, because I really just want to help people out. I want people to learn about OT. I want them to love it as much as I do. And I want to make this application process as easy as possible, because oftentimes you go through it alone. And it's terrifying, and it's hard, and it's difficult. So thank you for joining us. Hopefully this is helpful to all of our readers and our viewers. We're definitely going to take this video here on YouTube, and I'm going to put it on the site with some text and copy to kind of let people know. And we'll re-upload it on Facebook, and that's that. That's it. Thanks for joining us, Ray.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to just reach out whenever you guys need someone to speak on a topic.
Yeah, of course. So, and then for all the viewers, on the bottom of the YouTube description, I will put some links to like our resources or AOTA's resources on schools. I'll leave it down at the bottom so you can kind of click as we talk and learn a little bit more. But for now, that's it, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye, guys.